I just watched episode 3 of Survivor 42. That was wild. Oh my god. I never expected that from episode 3 of this season. That was crazy. Oh my. And so much of it, and actually a lot of it came down to Chanel not. I think I didn't really like the attitude that Chanel seemed to have in this episode when she was so pissed at Daniel. I mean, her reaction in that final tribal council to Daniel, it seemed like really, really poor form, like really bad play when you don't have a say in the decision, and he's your only hope of your alliance sticking together. And he says she's just really angry at Daniel like that. I guess since she has no vote, she can then argue that she was never going to vote Jenny out or never going to vote Lydia out, because she never had to put her pen to paper, But it just seemed like poor form. What was really poor form from Chanel, though, was risking your vote when you wanted to work with Mike and Jenny, and you knew damn well that Mike didn't have a vote. Why on earth would you do that? I hate this idea that she's like, oh, but I'm here to play hardball. I would never be that confident that Omar wouldn't be thinking the exact same thing, which he obviously was. That's the prisoner's dilemma, of course. So this is actually seeing it in full form, actually how they pretty much intended it, I'm sure, that they wanted to see play out. First time both people risked their votes that I can remember. And it's just two people. So it was pretty cool dynamic. They both say, okay, let's work together to help each other, and then they both risk their votes. I just don't get, Jenny or Chanel knew she was going to tribal council that night, and that literally was the decision that sent the whole thing in disaster. Her alliance with Mike and Jenny would have been fine if she had her vote. That's all you need. That's the one thing you needed to have, and you lost it. So I think this was a really bad episode for Chanel, first of all. Really good episode for Hai, despite being on the bottom in terms of, or on the outs of what the actual alliance was supposed to be. It's crazy to me that, Mike, Jenny, Daniel, and and Chanel were all going to be together, and then it was just Hai and Lydia, but they bungled it up so bad. So Mike didn't have a vote, and now Chanel didn't have a vote. And Hai was able to maneuver it well enough where he was reading the room. You could see, I don't know if they cut this in a certain way, but he seemed to have a visible reaction to when Daniel was saying, when Jeff said, "Who puts you at ease, Daniel?" And he maimed Mike and Chanel as two of the people. That seemed to be like a red flag to him. And then he also showed Chanel mouthing the name Lydia to Daniel. But wow, what a vote. It came down to a 2-2 vote at a 6-person tribe. And then on a revote, it was a tie again. Hai really stood his ground, which, I mean, good for Hai. I don't know if he knows for sure that Chanel was out on him or not, but he knows that if he didn't get this tie, that it was going to go in the way he didn't want. So he's put his foot down, and that's a good thing to do, especially against a player like Daniel, who does not want to go to rocks or any means. But even so, I don't even know necessarily what Chanel and Mike would have preferred to see happen, because the other option is Daniel ties, and then Jenny would be safe, but you'd have such a good chance of going. It's a 1 in 4 chance of you going, and basically a 3 in 4 chance of one of your alliance going anyway. So I don't know if they necessarily would have even wanted him to vote that way, because this was just a less chaotic move for them to do. Unfortunately, poor Jenny. I was really actually looking forward to seeing Jenny play. She seemed pretty level-headed, and I was interested to see that kind of personality type in this game and see her go further. I thought she would have been fun to watch, but unfortunately, a victim of some of this mess that's kind of surrounding her. She just found herself in a group of people where half the votes were missing, and then Daniel didn't want to put his life on the line, which is fair. But Daniel, obviously, he was saying to Hai and Lydia, "You're not gonna hold this against me, are you?" And they say no, but of course they're gonna hold it against him. No one is gonna be able to trust Daniel now. He's put himself in a pretty rough position. Honestly, I think, like, not even exaggerating. I think this, even if he survives or have some longevity, I think he's probably put himself in the position to where he can't win. Like, he'll be seen as that kind of the guy that gets dragged to the end or something, because he's just like he's so flippant and flip floppy. Chanel called him a snake, so he's gonna just have such a bad rep. So where he's like gonna have no winning equity, but hey, he didn't want to go to rocks. Fair enough. But it was such a wild scenario. Not only did we get a vote or a tie vote and then a tie revote with less votes than there are people, but then we also, in the deliberation process, it was literally down to Daniel versus Hai, which is really interesting as well. And the other two could give input, but didn't have any say actually in the decision. That was wild. It seemed especially wild to me because if Daniel wanted to, they could have gone to rocks, and then Mike and Chanel could have been vulnerable right there, and one of them could have gone. So they really were helpless without their vote. Like, people were risking their votes all over the place, but we're actually seeing this season just how risky that can be. You didn't see it too much in the previous season. Usually they were pretty conservative, or we never had like chaotic outcomes like this. But wow, this was a really fun episode, honestly. You saw that Marianne found the 3-way shared immunity idol, and her phrase was, "It's another classic case of a bunny rabbit having dinner in the mailbox." I don't think I've ever heard that phrase in my life, but she worked it in there immediately. She didn't even wait to say it. So now she's going to be saying it every time, because she didn't wait to say it after one challenge, when she knows she hasn't heard the other phrases. And but Mike waited for the other tribe to say something, and they didn't. So imagine if the other tribe was doing the same thing, and they actually could have activated the idol. That would have been wild. This was a funny interaction where Daniel asked Mike for the idol so he could read the fine print, as he said. And he basically confirms that the idol would be activated regardless. Once you reach the merge, all the idols would be activated, even if they weren't activated prior. And so that pretty much affirmed in his mind that he didn't have an incentive to vote Mike out. Might as well use it for him. Then we saw this challenge where Jonathan beasted the whole thing for his tribe. And I thought that was going to be the story of that challenge. But really it turned into, they beasted it and were out of it early, and the other two tribes just could not complete that part of the challenge because the ocean was getting so rough. The current was so hardcore, whipping them, and they could not even function out there. It was rough. It looked rough just from watching it. I can't imagine being out there. It seemed like a hard time. And so much so that Jeff had another Survivor First, where they stopped the challenge, come back on land. They had production go grab the keys for them, and they just resumed the challenge on land, which was pretty interesting. And then ultimately Vati loses immunity just barely. And then Chanel and Omar go on that journey, but for the reward. A really interesting dynamic, and unfortunate for Daniel that they had to go to tribal council, because otherwise it seemed like he was in a pretty good spot. He was actually in the middle, and they were none the wiser that Hai and Lydia thought they both seemed pretty confident they had Daniel and Chanel, and then Mike and Jenny were pretty confident they had Daniel and Chanel, and they actually did. But then the whole risking the vote was a disaster scenario. Chanel was aware of this possibility that she could lose the vote at least. She wasn't so cocky that she would just assume that she got the read right against Omar and got the extra vote. So she at least was aware of this and wanted to get Hai and Lydia to then split the vote so that then they could override and get Lydia to go. But Hai correctly sussed out right then and there that Chanel was being sus, which is really good. Hai has shown really good gameplay, potential longevity in this game for sure. Like, he could be a real threat for the game just based on what I'm seeing here. He really read that so well. It was like, wow, what an attitude shift for Chanel coming back to be in such a panic and suddenly want to have all men. Like Chanel really, and she really said in her confessional that she's like, I don't even have a vote. I don't need a vote. I can sway the vote however I want it to go, and I don't even need to vote. She was so cocky. She was playing killer, but it really was actually ended up being a bad episode for her, which sucks because I've liked Chanel so far. But it was a solid episode for High all around. Really good reads, and putting his foot down when absolutely necessary. And he needed that to keep Lydia around for sure. And so Chanel, I'm sure, is mad at Daniel, and of course probably thinks Daniel's to blame. Probably went home whenever she gets voted out, still thinking Daniel's to blame. Probably still thinks Daniel's to blame to this day. But in reality, it was her that set so much of this emotion. First of all, risking your vote so foolishly, and putting them in this position to begin with when it didn't even need to be questioned. They would have just, I would have been swindled. It would have been done. So not only that, but then when she did come back from risking her vote, she played it really poorly and made it very obvious that she had some ulterior motive here to immediately be panicked like that. This was an excellent episode. It was an excellent episode. And so we actually got to see the fruits of their labor of all the risking the votes stuff that they said coming into Survivor 41 was going to be a big deal. Or Jeff specifically said that. It was like a big thing they were going for, is this idea that you'll never even know if everybody will have votes going in tribal council and that kind of thing. So we saw it pay off actually in a good way this time. Where in other ways it can feel a little chaotic, but it's like a little messy, a little chaotic, but it also feels like deserved. If like they played it poorly, or specific players played it poorly at least. Mike did risk it, and they knew about this ahead of time, so Mike wasn't in too poor form considering that. Jenny unfortunately found herself in the middle of that alliance, but Chanel, we just saw how you can misplay it dramatically, and came back to bite them all immediately. So sad to see Jenny go, but I don't know if I could have survived a rock draw on episode 3, honestly, because I would have been terrified at the possibility of Mike going out on a rock draw after I had thought he was safe this whole episode because no one was targeting him. That would have killed me. But yeah, kudos to High. Really a shining star in this episode. But all around, a lot of fun. Daniel, though not the best play this episode, he went from being in like the middle position to now probably having no trust from either side. He did make for a lot of entertaining moments already, and Mike has been a blast to watch as well. So, man, I'm really looking forward to seeing how the season plays out, honestly. Okay, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to go in the description, and you can click the link to leave some feedback or comments for us, or you can also click the link to check out all of our social medias, and come back next week for more Survivor 42, okay? Like the video, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and feel free to check out, if you enjoyed this video, check out our review of Survivor Palau, which was the most recent Survivor season we wrapped up with my friend Alec as we've been working our way through chronologically. The earlier seasons, I've been showing him Survivor for the first time ever, so that's fun. If you want a little old school Survivor, go check that out. And thanks. Take care.